I'm Kat, I'm 25 and I've suffered with an eating disorder since the age of 11. My eating disorder first started as a result of a couple of things. When I first started secondary school, I'd started puberty, and as a result my body was larger and more curvaceous than a number of my peers. They don't teach you that when you start secondary school, and as a result I felt very self-conscious of my weight. Compared to a number of other people in my year, and I immediately felt like I didn't fit in. I immediately felt very self-conscious about my weight compared to some of the thinner pre-adolescent girls that were in my year. So that was obviously one part of my eating disorder, and the second part was also very social based. I struggled to make friends, I struggled to fit in, and I really aspired to be like the thin, popular people within my year group. And there was a very direct trigger that resulted from all of these things that were going on when a boy called me fat in year 7 who I fancied, and so that had an impact on me. I decided that I needed to do something quite dramatically to try and fit in, to try and lose weight, and so that was when I really started to do something about my diet and started restricting. The second aspect as well was that I found it really difficult to make friends at my secondary school. For me, I felt different. Some of my interests perhaps didn't match up with theirs, and so I really struggled to fit in. Whereas I wanted to be liked, accepted, and popular, and the two combined I didn't really fit in. There was a main trigger point which contributed to my eating disorder. A boy who I fancied, and everyone knew that he fancied me, called me fat, and that was the real sort of trigger that contributed to me going on a diet and starting to do something about my weight. My parents weren't aware of my suffering right up until the point that I required a hospital admission. Obviously I had to tell them at that point, and I was in a position where either my teachers at school were going to tell them, my doctor was going to tell them, and so in the end I kind of had to rip the plaster off, as it were, go through that pain, and it alleviated a lot of stress when they did find out, and they've been very supportive ever since. I then obviously went through the diagnosis procedure, and because my parents had private health insurance at that point, I was able to access private care, and I was an inpatient for a number of months whilst I was trying to manage my A-levels, so it wasn't the best timing on my part. I still managed to come out with very good grades and go to university. However, a number of years down the line, I ended up relapsing. I dealt with some of the underlying issues whilst I was in hospital, but not all of them. And a number of years down the line, these re-emerged when a lot of points started bubbling up again, and I went back. I recognised that I needed help, and I needed help quite quickly. I went to my doctor and asked for a referral to the NHS. She was brilliant, and sent a referral off very, very quickly. However, I waited a year before I received an assessment. This is the process in order to get any support for mental health. I waited a year before I received my assessment. The assessment was very thorough, and I was asked a lot of questions. I had to fill in a detailed form before I even got to the assessment. But the conclusion from the assessment was that I wasn't deemed sick enough to meet their very strict criteria for treatment, which in my head left some questions. You know, why wasn't I sick enough? What was their very strict criteria? And that really started to make me feel very very challenged, and the eating disorder in me was really pushing me to actually try and meet that criteria, which is not the right message that I think that they should be sending. And the activist in me started challenging that. Several complaint letters down the line, I managed to find out what the criteria was, and although I did become actually quite poorly as a result of it, I ended up in A&E a couple of months down the line with malnutrition. Fortunately, my parents have been able to provide private health outpatient care over the year. However, I don't think it's good enough. It's not the right message to be sending to people. We know from research that early intervention is not only cost effective, but it also saves lives in what is is the most deadliest mental illness. We know that 1 in 5 people with an eating disorder will die prematurely. So last year, the Liberal Democrats announced £150 million of funding towards early intervention in eating disorders. I think it's a brilliant step, although I think there's still a long way to go. We've got to recognise that there's 1.6 million people in the UK suffering with eating disorders, and there may well be more. These statistics were completed in 2004, so there may well be more. But also, it's brilliant that just this week, the Liberal Democrats have announced £1.25 billion of funding, particularly towards CAM services, so that's child and adolescent services. And I think this is even more important to helping in early intervention. Again, helping the children, helping families, while problems are still beginning to develop, while children are still young. And being able to deal with them then and there, before it reaches adolescence, before it reaches adulthood, and before the young person is entering the working world, it's really critical. Mental health problems and good mental health is incredibly important to everybody's well-being. Poor mental health and not dealing with mental health issues can contribute to so many of society's problems.